6 months after the Vorthak Empire ceased to exist, the galaxy had settled into a new kind of peace. It was quieter than the old peace, more careful, and infinitely more respectful of human opinions. The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked much the same as it had before the war, but the atmosphere was completely different. When Ambassador Taemin Park entered for the first session since the conflict ended, every conversation stopped. Every alien delegate turned to watch him walk to the human section, and they watched with the kind of attention usually reserved for apex predators. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Park of Earth," announced the session chairman, his voice carefully neutral. Taemin stood at the same podium where he had once begged for intervention to save human lives. Today, he was here to explain the new reality to species that were still learning to adjust to it. 6 months ago, he began, the Vorthak Empire launched coordinated attacks on 17 human colonies. They murdered civilians, tortured prisoners, and broadcast their crimes as demonstrations of strength. When we asked this council for help, you told us it was not your concern. The chamber was silent. Several delegates who had voted against intervention were conspicuously absent from today's session. Today, the Vorthak Empire no longer exists. Their military is destroyed. Their leadership is in custody awaiting trial, and their former territories are under human administration while we help them rebuild their government with better priorities. He paused, letting that sink in. Some of you have asked if humanity intends to become the galaxy's new military power. The answer is no. We never wanted to be soldiers again. But you have taught us that sometimes peace can only be maintained by those willing and able to enforce it. The screen behind him, images appeared of the new Galactic Peace Enforcement Division. The ships looked different from the old peacekeeping vessels, larger, more heavily armed, and crewed by people who wore military uniforms instead of diplomatic robes. The GPED will have authority to investigate violations of galactic law, to protect civilian populations from aggression, and to ensure that crimes like those committed by the Vorthaks never happen again. War Chief Graktor's replacement, a younger Vorthak named Sektar, raised his hand. The new Vorthak government had been very careful to select leaders who understood the new galactic order. Ambassador Park, what guarantees can you give that human forces will not abuse this authority? Taemin smiled, but it was not the gentle smile the galaxy remembered. The same guarantee you gave us when we asked you to protect innocent civilians. None at all. The silence that followed was deafening. However, Taemin continued, I can tell you what history tells us. For 50 years, humanity had access to detailed intelligence about every major civilization in this galaxy. We knew your weaknesses, your strategic resources, your military capabilities. We had agents in your governments, your military forces, and your commercial enterprises. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably as they realized the implications. If we had wanted to conquer you, we could have done it at any time in the past, 50 years. We chose peace instead. Even now, after you abandoned us to face genocide alone, we are offering you the chance to participate in a better system of galactic governance. The Quillan representative, Veltar, made a nervous sound. And if we decline this offer? Then you decline it, Taemin said simply. But the GPED will still exist, and it will still enforce galactic law. The only question is whether you want a voice in how that law is written. In the human section of the chamber, Admiral So-Young Kim, no longer Captain Kim of a disguised peacekeeping vessel, watched the proceedings with satisfaction. She now commanded the GPED's second fleet from her flagship, the Harmony's Edge, which had been revealed to be considerably more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Her tactical officer, Hyun-Woo Lee, had been promoted to captain and commanded his own ship. Her communications officer, Ji-Un Choi, was now in charge of intelligence coordination for the entire sector. The helpful, harmless humans who had served as peacekeepers for 50 years had turned out to be a complete fiction. Admiral, whispered, her aide, we're getting reports from the Outer Rim. 3 systems are requesting immediate GPED assistance with pirate raids. Send the 4th Squadron, So-Young replied quietly. Full combat deployment. Let the pirates know that the old rules no longer apply. The old rules had been simple. Commit crimes in remote areas, and the gentle human peacekeepers might eventually show up to mediate a solution. The new rules were very different: commit crimes anywhere, and human warships would arrive to solve the problem permanently. Piracy had dropped by 90% in the past 6 months. On the former Vorthak homeworld, now called New Hope, reconstruction efforts were proceeding under human supervision. The planet's new government had been elected from among the Vorthak civilians who had opposed the old military regime, and they were working hard to prove they deserved a second chance. Sung Min, no longer pretending to be a harmless cultural attaché, served as the human liaison to the new government. He had spent 20 years learning everything about Vorthak society, and now he was using that knowledge to help them build something better. The new constitution is almost complete, reported Prime Minister Velkaran, a former teacher who had been imprisoned by the old regime for opposing the war. It includes all the protections you requested for minority rights and civilian oversight of the military. Good, Sung Min said. Remember, we're not here to rule you. We're here to make sure you never again become a threat to innocent people, and if we succeed in rebuilding, if we prove we can govern ourselves peacefully, then human forces will withdraw, and you'll be welcomed back into the galactic community as equals. Velkaran seemed surprised. You would really leave, even after what we did to your people? Sungmin looked out the window at the city below, where human engineers worked alongside Vorthak civilians to repair the damage from the war. We told you from the beginning that we prefer peace to war. That hasn't changed. But we also told you there would be consequences for your choices. And those consequences? You'll spend the next generation proving that you've learned from your mistakes. Your children will grow up in a society that values cooperation over conquest. And if anyone ever threatens innocent civilians the way your old government did, they'll face the same fate. It was a harsh lesson, but it was also a fair one. The galaxy was learning that humans could be generous in victory, but they never forgot, and they never forgave those who targeted the defenseless. In the research stations and universities across human space, a new generation of scientists and scholars was growing up with a very different understanding of their place in the galaxy. Dr. Miso Han, daughter of the former intelligence director, taught xenobiology to students who would become the next generation of human diplomats and administrators, but her lessons included subjects that previous generations had never needed to learn. Remember, she told her class, understanding alien biology isn't just about scientific curiosity. It's about knowing how different species think, what motivates them, and what weaknesses they might try to exploit. One of her students, a young man named Jinho Park, raised his hand. Professor Han, are we studying these species as potential enemies? We're studying them as potential friends, she replied. But we're also studying them as potential threats. Our parents' generation learned the hard way that hoping for the best isn't enough. You have to be prepared for the worst. She pointed to a chart showing the biological and psychological profiles of major galactic species. The Vorthaks believed that strength was the only thing that mattered, so they saw our diplomacy as weakness. The Quillans believed that everything could be bought or sold, so they saw our principles as just another commodity. The Ethereals believed that physical concerns were beneath them, so they saw our emotions as primitive. And now they all understand that humans are capable of both great peace and great war. They've learned to respect our diplomacy because they've seen what happens when diplomacy fails. The lesson was interrupted by an emergency announcement. All students and faculty, please report to the main auditorium for an important broadcast. In the auditorium, hundreds of humans gathered to watch a transmission from Earth. Fleet Admiral Chang Ho-yoon appeared on screen, his uniform displaying decorations that had been classified until recently. Citizens of the Human Federation, he began. I am pleased to announce that the Galactic Council has unanimously approved the new Galactic Peace Accords. Under these accords, the targeting of civilian populations is now classified as a crime against all sapient life, punishable by immediate military intervention. Applause filled the auditorium. The accords also established the Human Federation as the primary enforcement authority for galactic law, with the authority to investigate threats to peace and take appropriate action. The applause grew louder. Some of you have asked whether this makes us the rulers of the galaxy. The answer is no. We are not rulers. We are guardians. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, and we ensure that the strong cannot prey upon the weak. Admiral Chang Ho paused, his expression becoming more serious. The Vorthak Empire lasted exactly 72 hours after the humans stopped pretending to be peaceful. War Chief Graktor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. The humans fought with a precision that was terrifying in its efficiency. They didn't waste shots, they didn't make dramatic gestures, and they didn't give speeches about honor or glory. They simply killed everything that threatened them, and they did it very, very well. How are they doing this? He demanded of his tactical officer. Where are these ships coming from? Unknown, War Chief. Our sensors show empty space. Then suddenly there are human vessels firing on us. It's like they can become invisible. What the Vorthaks didn't understand was that the humans had spent 50 years turning their enemy's own infrastructure against them. The defensive improvements that helpful human engineers had installed on Vorthak ships included certain undocumented features. The upgraded sensor arrays had blind spots that human ships could exploit. The modernized communication systems could be overridden by anyone who knew the right codes, and the humans knew all the right codes. Captain Wu Jin Lee watched from the bridge of his battlecruiser as the Vorthak fleet tried desperately to coordinate a defense. Their communication systems kept failing at crucial moments. Their targeting computers developed mysterious glitches. Their shields flickered on and off according to patterns only the humans understood. It's almost sad, said his tactical officer Dayun Kang. They have no idea how much of their own technology we control. Focus on the command ships, Wu Jin ordered. Cut off their leadership and the rest will surrender. It was a strategy that had been refined through centuries of human warfare. Don't fight the entire enemy force. Remove their ability to coordinate, then deal with the scattered remains. Simple, efficient, and devastatingly effective. On the Vorthak homeworld, Sung Min Oh had not evacuated as ordered. Instead, he had made his way to the planet's central command facility, where Vorthak military leaders were trying to coordinate their defense. For 20 years, he had been just another harmless human academic, studying their culture and language. The guards at the command center knew him as Dr. O, the friendly researcher who sometimes brought them coffee and asked polite questions about their military traditions. They had no idea that he spoke their language better than most of them did, that he had memorized every security protocol in the building, and that the innocent questions he asked had given him a complete understanding of their command structure. Dr. O, said the guard captain, you should not be here. There is fighting in orbit. I know, Sung Min replied in perfect Vorthak. That's why I came. Your people are about to lose everything they've built, and it doesn't have to happen. The guard stared at him in shock. Humans weren't supposed to speak Vorthak that well. Most of them could barely manage simple phrases. I have information that could save millions of Vorthak lives, Sung Min continued. But I need to speak with your supreme commander. Within minutes, he was standing in the war room where Vorthak generals were watching their empire collapse in real time. Fleet after fleet was going dark. Their homeworld's defenses were failing, and they still didn't understand how it was happening. I can end this, Sung Min told them quietly. I can contact the human fleet and arrange a ceasefire, but only if you agree to certain terms. What terms? Demanded Supreme Commander Thekvar. Immediate withdrawal from all occupied human territories. Release of all prisoners. Reparations for the families of those you murdered. And a formal apology to the Galactic Council for your aggression. Never, Thekvar roared. We are Vorthak. We do not surrender to weak species like humans, Sung Min sighed. I was afraid you would say that. He pressed a button on the device he had been carrying, and every screen in the command center went dark. The lights failed. The air circulation stopped. The massive war room was suddenly as quiet as a tomb. You see, Sung Min explained to the terrified generals, for the past 20 years I've been making small improvements to your infrastructure. Better power systems, More efficient computers, upgraded life support, all of it with hidden features that I could activate when necessary. Emergency lighting came on, bathing the room in red. Through the reinforced windows, the Vorthak leaders could see their capital city going dark, section by section. Your homeworld is now completely cut off from the rest of your empire, Sungmin continued. Your ships can't communicate with each other. Your planetary defenses are offline. Your life support systems will fail in approximately 6 hours. He sat down calmly in one of their command chairs. Unless, of course, you would like to reconsider my offer. In space above the planet, Admiral Chang Ho-yoon received the signal that Phase 2 of Operation Clean Slate was complete. The Vorthak military was neutralized. Their leadership was cut off and their ability to coordinate resistance was destroyed. But the Admiral took no pleasure in the victory. He had seen the reports from the liberated colonies, had read the testimony of the survivors. The Vorthaks hadn't just conquered human worlds, they had tortured and murdered civilians for entertainment, broadcast their crimes as propaganda, and used human prisoners as test subjects for biological weapons. Admiral, said his communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Quillen Consortium. They're requesting immediate talks. Are they now? Chang Ho replied. How interesting. Yesterday they couldn't be bothered to respond to our diplomatic requests. Today they want to talk. They're offering full reparations for their support of Vorthak expansion, plus exclusive trading rights with human colonies. Chang Ho almost laughed. The Quillens had made enormous profits by financing Vorthak aggression, selling them weapons and supplies while maintaining their pretense of neutrality. Now that their clients were losing, they wanted to switch sides. Tell them we'll consider their offer, he said, after we finish dealing with their Vorthak friends. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer interested in the kind of diplomacy that let crimes be forgiven in exchange for economic advantages. There would be consequences for what had happened, and those consequences would be permanent. On Aurora Station, the facility that Dr. Yu Jin Park had died to protect, human forces found evidence of atrocities that made even hardened soldiers sick. The Vorthaks had been using the station as a biological weapons research facility, experimenting on prisoners from dozens of species. Commander Hae Young Shin led the team that secured the station's laboratories. What they found there would be used as evidence in the war crimes tribunals that would follow, but it also served another purpose. Document everything, she ordered her troops. Every experiment, every victim, every piece of equipment. I want the entire galaxy to see what we've been fighting. The evidence from Aurora Station was broadcast to every news network in known space. Images of torture chambers disguised as medical facilities. Records of experiments that violated every treaty on the treatment of prisoners. Personal logs from Vorthak scientists casually discussing the best ways to cause pain and terror. The galaxy watched in horror, and suddenly humanity's swift and devastating response didn't seem like overreaction anymore. It seemed like justice. The crystal cities of the ethereal collective, ancient beings who had existed for millennia, found themselves facing a species they no longer understood. The humans they had known were patient, diplomatic, always willing to find peaceful solutions to complex problems. These humans were different. These humans moved with cold purpose, speaking softly but carrying weapons that could destroy planets. They made demands instead of requests, set ultimatums instead of offering compromises. Perhaps, said the collective's primary consciousness, we underestimated them. The statement was transmitted to the human diplomatic mission that had appeared in their system without warning. The mission was led by someone they recognized, Ambassador Tae-min Park, who had been so polite and accommodating for so many years. Now he sat across from them in a negotiation chamber, and his eyes held something they had never seen there before. Not anger. Anger would have been understandable. This was something colder and more dangerous. For 50 years, Taemin said quietly, my species served as peacekeepers for this galaxy. We prevented wars, mediated disputes, and protected the innocent. We did this because we believed it was right and because we hoped to build a better universe for everyone. He paused, letting his words sink in. 3 days ago, Your collective voted to ignore the systematic murder of human civilians. You declared it not your concern when an entire species was being targeted for extermination. Today, you want to discuss our overreaction to these crimes. The ethereal beings shimmered with distress. They had never heard such quiet fury from a human before. You are concerned about our response, Taman continued. Good, you should be concerned, because you are finally seeing what humans really are when someone threatens our families. He stood up, his diplomatic suit as neat and professional as always. But something in his posture reminded the ancient aliens that his species had once conquered their own homeworld through pure violence. The first sign that something had changed came when human ships across the galaxy simply disappeared. Not destroyed, disappeared. Communication arrays that had carried human diplomatic messages for decades went silent. Trade routes that human merchants had traveled for generations showed no traffic. Peacekeeping vessels that had been visible and available to any species requesting help suddenly weren't there anymore. On Nexus Prime, the alien delegates began to worry when they realized they couldn't contact any human officials. The human embassy was empty, its staff vanished overnight. Even Ambassador Tae-Min Park was gone, leaving only a sealed diplomatic pouch that wouldn't open for another 4 hours. Where did they go? Asked Veltar, the Quillen trade representative. His species controlled commerce across 12 sectors, but suddenly every human merchant ship had vanished from his tracking systems. Perhaps they retreated to their homeworld, suggested the ethereal collective's spokesperson. Humans have always been cautious when faced with superior force. But War Chief Graktor was not so sure. Something felt wrong about this sudden disappearance. In his experience, prey didn't vanish. It ran to where you could see it, so you could chase it. Find them, he ordered his intelligence officers. I want to know where every human ship in the galaxy has gone. What he didn't know was that the human ships hadn't gone anywhere. They were still exactly where they had always been. They had simply stopped pretending to be what they appeared to be. The merchant vessel Prosperity had spent 15 years carrying cargo between human and alien worlds. Captain Wu Jin Lee had always been friendly and helpful, his ship's holds full of Earth-manufactured goods and colonial resources. Alien customs officials had inspected his ship dozens of times and found exactly what they expected to find. What they hadn't found were the hidden compartments, the concealed weapon systems, and the military crew that had been disguised as civilian traders. The Prosperity wasn't a merchant ship. It was a battlecruiser that had been playing a role for a decade and a half. Now the role was over. Captain, said his tactical officer, a woman named Da Yun Kang, who had supposedly been the ship's cargo coordinator. We're in position over the Vorthak supply depot on Kepler 7. All systems are showing green. Wu Jin looked at the peaceful world below, where Vorthak forces had built a major supply base to support their expansion into human space. For months, the Prosperity had been making regular cargo runs to this system, mapping every detail of the base's defenses. Target the command center first, he said, then the weapon depots. I want that base completely disabled within 10 minutes. Yes, Captain. The attack was swift and devastating. The Vorthaks had built their defenses to stop an invasion fleet, not a single ship that was already inside their perimeter. Within minutes, their main supply base was burning wreckage. Similar scenes played out across Vorthak space. The research. Ship Harmony had been studying star formations near their shipyards for 3 years. The mining vessel Prosperity had been extracting resources from asteroids that happened to be perfectly positioned to monitor fleet movements. The hospital ship Mercy had been providing medical aid to colonies that were strategically located near communication hubs. All of them had been warriors pretending to be civilians. All of them had been waiting for this moment. On the Vorthak homeworld, Sung Min-oh walked calmly through the capital city as alarms began to sound. Around him, Vorthak citizens looked up at the sky in confusion as their planetary defense grid flickered and died. He made his way to the central communication tower, using access codes he had obtained through 20 years of patient intelligence gathering. The guards knew him as a harmless academic and let him pass without question. In the tower's main control room, He connected a small device to the primary communication array. Within seconds, every message sent from the Vorthak homeworld would be intercepted and copied to human intelligence. But more importantly, the device also broadcast a single coded transmission to the human fleet that was waiting just outside the system. "This is Asset 7, he said quietly into his communicator. "The shields are down. You have a clear path to target." The response came from Fleet Admiral Chang Ho-yoon himself. "Understood, Asset 7. You have 15 minutes to reach the evacuation point." Sung-min smiled as he left the tower. He had no intention of evacuating. He had work to finish here. In space above the Vorthak homeworld, what had appeared to be an empty asteroid field suddenly revealed itself to be the human Fifth Fleet. Ships that had been disguised as mining operations and research stations powered up weapons that weren't supposed to exist. The battleship Incheon, Admiral Chang Ho's flagship, had been hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid for 2 years, its crew maintaining the fiction that they were civilian miners. Now the rock shell fell away, revealing a warship larger than anything the Vorthaks had ever built. "All ships," Chang Ho announced, "commence Operation Clean Slate. Primary targets are military installations only. Civilian areas are off limits. We are here to stop aggression, not commit genocide." The human fleet moved with a precision that spoke of years of planning. Every target had been mapped, every weakness identified, every possible response calculated. This wasn't an angry mob seeking revenge. This was a military force that had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this moment. On New Seoul, the colony world where Minji Kim had died, Vorthak occupation forces watched in shock as human ships emerged from what they had thought was empty space. The derelict satellite network that had been too damaged to repair suddenly came online, revealing itself as a defensive array that had been waiting for activation. Commander Jin-Woo Park led the liberation force that landed on New Seoul's surface. His troops moved with quiet efficiency, targeting Vorthak military positions while carefully avoiding areas where human prisoners were being held. "Remember," he told his soldiers, "our people are down there. Every shot you fire, make sure it's the right one." The Vorthak garrison, which had been terrorizing civilians for days, suddenly found themselves facing soldiers who fought with a cold precision they had never encountered. These weren't the gentle peacekeepers they had grown used to dismissing. These were professional warriors who had learned their craft in conflicts the galaxy had forgotten about. The battle for New Seoul lasted 6 hours. When it was over, every Vorthak soldier was either dead or captured, and the human prisoners were free. But the real shock came when the galaxy realized how many humans had been hiding among them all along. The medical researcher, Dr. Hai-jin, SEO who had been working on Quillen Prime for 8 years, revealed herself as the intelligence operative who had been mapping Quillen trade networks. The cultural attaché Min Soo-jung, who had spent a decade studying ethereal art, was actually a communications specialist who had been monitoring their quantum transmissions. Across the galaxy, hundreds of humans dropped their cover identities and revealed their true purposes. Teachers became intelligence officers, doctors became biological warfare specialists, traders became fleet commanders. The galaxy had trusted humans because they seemed harmless. Now they were learning that harmless and peaceful were not the same thing. On Nexus Prime, the diplomatic pouch that Ambassador Taemin Park had left finally opened, automatically broadcasting its contents to every news network in known space. For 50 years, his recorded message began, humanity has served as the galaxy's peacekeepers. We have mediated your conflicts, protected your shipping lanes, and maintained the stability that has allowed your civilizations to prosper. The image of the familiar diplomatic Taemin was replaced by files, documents, and recordings. Evidence of every crime the Vorthaks had committed. Proof of their biological experiments on prisoners. Records of their systematic murder of civilians. We asked for justice through proper channels, the message continued. We were ignored. We asked for intervention to protect the innocent. We were told this was not your concern. More files appeared on screen. These showed the hidden human intelligence network the disguised warships, the years of careful preparation. You saw our preference for peace as weakness. You mistook our patience for inability. Today you learn the truth. The final image was a star map showing human military forces across the galaxy. There were far more of them than anyone had imagined. We are not your enemies, Taemin's voice concluded, but we are no longer your servants. The age of human diplomacy is over. From now on we enforce peace through strength. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. In the Quillen Consortium's trading halls, spider-like merchants who had grown rich from conflicts suddenly realized that every trade route they controlled passed through systems where humans had established research stations and mining operations. In the ethereal collective's crystal cities, ancient beings who thought themselves above physical concerns discovered that the human students they had allowed into their universities had been systematically studying their technology and weaknesses. Across known space, species that had dismissed humanity as useful but harmless began to understand what they had really been living with for 50 years. The humans hadn't been weak. They had been patient. And now their patience had run out. The attack came at dawn on New Sol, one of humanity's oldest colony worlds. Minji Kim was having breakfast with her parents when the sky lit up with the fire of descending ships. She was 22 years old, a junior officer aboard the exploration vessel New Dawn, and she had never seen anything like the massive Vorthak destroyers that now filled the horizon. "Get to the shelters," her father said, but they all knew it was too late. The Vorthaks weren't here to occupy territory. They were here to make a point. Across 17 human worlds, the same scene played out. Vorthak fleets arrived without warning, overwhelming the light defensive forces that protected civilian colonies. The attacks were coordinated, planned, and brutal. But more than that, they were broadcast across the galaxy for everyone to see. War Chief Graktor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his forces systematically destroyed the human settlements below. Every moment was being transmitted to news networks throughout known space, a demonstration of Vorthak's strength and human weakness. "Let the galaxy see," he announced to his officers. "Let them understand what happens to species that forget their place. The humans have played at being peacekeepers for too long. It is time for real warriors to take control." On New Sol, Minji found herself trapped in her family's home as Vorthak soldiers moved through the streets. She activated her emergency communicator, the one all colony residents carried, and tried to reach the authorities. "This is Junior Officer Minji Kim, registration 77 Alpha 9, she whispered into the device. "New Sol is under attack. Heavy casualties. They're executing civilians in the streets." She paused, watching through her window, as neighbors she had known since childhood were dragged from their homes. Some were shot immediately. Others were loaded onto transport ships, their destination unknown. "Tell my captain," she continued, her voice steady despite the horror around her. "Tell them we remembered our history. Tell them we didn't break." The transmission cut off as Vorthak soldiers kicked in her door. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Taemin Park stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the broadcast feeds from the attacked worlds. Around him, alien delegates whispered among themselves, some showing sympathy, others seeming almost bored by the violence. "The attack on human colonies is a clear violation of galactic law," Taemin said, his voice carrying easily across the chamber. "I call for immediate intervention to stop this aggression." War Chief Graktor's image appeared on the main screen, transmitted from his flagship. "The colonies were harboring terrorists and criminals," he declared. "We acted within our rights to protect regional security." "By murdering civilians?" Taemin asked. "By showing strength, something humans have forgotten how to do." Several alien delegates made sounds of agreement. The Quillen representative, a spider-like creature named Veltar, tapped his legs in the pattern that meant approval. "The Vorthaks do seem to have acted decisively," he said. "Perhaps this is a matter for the affected species to resolve between themselves." "Agreed," said the Ethereal Collective's spokesperson. a shimmering cloud of energy that barely maintained a humanoid shape. We should not interfere in what appears to be a simple territorial dispute. Taman looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of species he had worked with for decades. Species he had helped, mediated for, protected. Now they sat quietly while his people died because they saw humans as too weak to matter. "I see," he said quietly. "Then this is indeed a matter for us to resolve ourselves." Something in his tone made a few of the delegates look up. For just a moment, there was something in the human ambassador's eyes that reminded them that Earth had not always been peaceful. But the moment passed, and Taman bowed politely. "I will inform my government of the Council's decision." As he left the chamber, he sent a single-word transmission to Earth: Icarus. On Earth, Director Namsu Han received the code word in his underground facility and felt his heart rate increase. Icarus was the final authorization, the point of no return. It meant that diplomacy had failed completely, and Operation Clean Slate was approved. "All stations," he announced to his staff. "Authorization level is now red. Repeat, authorization level is red. Begin immediate activation of all assets." Across the galaxy, the message went out through channels that the aliens had never known existed. To teachers who suddenly stopped being teachers. To doctors who suddenly had different priorities than healing. To traders whose cargo ships carried more than commercial goods. On the Vorthak homeworld, Sung Min-oh sat in his apartment and carefully assembled the communication device he had kept hidden for 20 years. Around him, the capital city celebrated their military victory with parades and demonstrations of strength. They had no idea that the harmless human cultural attaché was now in direct contact with Earth Command. "This is Deep Cover Asset 7, he transmitted. "I have full intelligence on primary targets. Planetary defense grid has been modified over the past 15 years. I can disable their shields on command." The response came immediately. "Understood, Asset 7. Stand by for coordination with strike elements." Sungmin allowed himself a small smile. For 2 decades, he had helped design improvements to the Vorthak defense systems, always suggesting ways to make them more efficient and powerful. What he had never mentioned was that every upgrade included certain undocumented features that could be activated remotely. The Vorthaks had been so proud of their modernized defenses. Soon they would learn exactly how modern they really were. On Aurora Station, Dr. Eugene Park worked frantically to document everything she had learned about Vorthak biological weapons research. The station was officially neutral, but she knew that wouldn't protect her much longer. Vorthak ships were already moving to secure strategic facilities across the sector. "Doctor," said her assistant, a young man named Quan Ho, "we're getting evacuation orders from Station Command. All non-essential personnel are to leave immediately." "You go," she said without looking up from her work. "I need another hour to weigh. Finish this." "Doctor, the Vorthaks will be here soon. You need to leave now." She finally looked up at him, seeing the fear in his eyes. He was just a graduate student, barely 20 years old. He didn't deserve to be caught up in this. "Take the shuttle," she said. "Take all the other civilians. Tell them I'll follow on the next transport." "But doctor," "That's an order, Quan Ho." He left reluctantly, and Yu-jin was alone in the laboratory. She worked for another 30 minutes, copying every piece of data she could find about Vorthak, experiments on human prisoners. Then she activated the station's emergency beacon, broadcasting everything she had learned on all frequencies. The data package included detailed biological analyses, tactical assessments, and a personal message. "They want to see what humans do when we're really angry. I think they're about to find out." The broadcast was still transmitting when Vorthak soldiers finally reached the laboratory. In Earth's orbital shipyards, facilities that had been decommissioned decades ago suddenly came back to life. Ships that existed only in classified files powered up their engines. Weapons that had been stored in deep maintenance were loaded and armed. Fleet Admiral Chang Ho-yoon stood on the bridge of the battleship Incheon, a vessel that most of the galaxy believed had been scrapped after the Yai, last human war. Around him, officers who had supposedly retired years ago took their positions at stations that weren't supposed to exist. "Admiral," said his communications officer, All fleets report ready for deployment. Operation Clean Slate is green across all sectors. Fleet composition: 237 ships of the line, 460 support vessels, and approximately 3,000 deep cover operatives in position across enemy territory. Chang Ho nodded. For 50 years, humanity had built and maintained the largest intelligence network in galactic history, all under the cover of peaceful exploration and diplomacy. Every human who had ever worked on an alien world, every cultural exchange, every trade mission, every peacekeeping deployment had been part of the greatest strategic deception ever attempted. "Open a channel to all commands," he said. The faces of human fleet commanders appeared on his screen. Men and women who had spent decades pretending to be civilian captains and administrators. Now they showed their true ranks and their true purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chang Ho said, "for 50 years we have served as the galaxy's peacekeepers. We have mediated conflicts, protected the innocent, and maintained stability across known space. We have been patient, diplomatic, and merciful." He paused, looking at each face on the screen. "That ends now. The Vorthax have chosen to target our civilians, to murder our people, and to broadcast their crimes as a demonstration of strength. They believe humans are weak because we prefer peace to war. They are about to learn the difference between preferring peace and being incapable of war. Operation Clean Slate is authorized. Show them what humans really are." The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, the human war machine that had been hidden for half a century began to move. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Taemin Park sat in his quarters and wrote a final diplomatic note. It was addressed to all members of the Galactic Council, and it was very short. 3 months had passed since the celebration on Nexus Prime. The galaxy had settled back into its normal rhythm of trade, diplomacy, and small conflicts that humans would step in to resolve. But something was changing in the outer sectors, and Captain So-Young Kim could feel it in her bones. The Harmony's edge moved slowly through the Kepler system, where 2 mining colonies had been fighting over asteroid rights. So-Young had spent a week talking to both sides, finding a solution that let them share the resources fairly. It was exactly the kind of work that had built humanity's reputation as the galaxy's peacemakers. "Captain," said Hyun-Woo Lee from his tactical station, "we're getting a priority message from Sector Command. Put it through." The face of Admiral Chen appeared on the main screen. He looked tired, and So-Young noticed he was speaking from his office on Earth instead of his usual command ship. "Captain Kim, we need you to investigate reports from the Outer Rim. Several colonies have gone dark in the last few weeks." "What kind of colonies?" So-Young asked. "Mixed species. Nothing that should interest anyone enough to attack them." "But the last transmissions mentioned Vorthax ships in the area." So-Young felt her stomach tighten. The Vorthax had been more aggressive lately, but they usually kept their expansion to their own territory. "Orders, sir?" "Investigate only. Do not engage. If you find evidence of Vorthax expansion, document it and report back. We're still trying to handle this through diplomatic channels." The connection ended, and So-Young stared at the empty screen. For a moment, something about this felt different, bigger. "Set course for the Tau Ceti system," she ordered. "Best speed." 2 days later, they found the first colony. What had once been New Shanghai, a small farming world with 3,000 settlers from a dozen different species, was now a wasteland. The cities were burned, the fields were scorched, and in orbit sat a Vorthax destroyer. "They're hailing us," Jiyeon reported, her voice tight. On screen, War Chief Graktor appeared, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. Behind him, So-Young could see Vorthax soldiers dragging prisoners across the bridge. Some of the prisoners were human. "Captain Kim," Graktor said, his voice full of mock courtesy. "How nice to see you again. I trust you are well?" "What happened to New Shanghai?" So-Young asked, keeping her voice steady. "A simple territorial adjustment. The colony was in violation of several trade agreements. We have taken responsibility for protecting the remaining population." "Protecting them?" Hyun-Woo muttered, but So-Young held up a hand to silence him. "I see. And the other colonies that have gone dark? Graktor's smile widened. Also under our protection now. The outer sectors are dangerous places, Captain, full of pirates and raiders. These poor settlers needed someone strong to defend them. I'd like to speak with the survivors. I'm afraid that won't be possible. They are being relocated to safer worlds. For their own good, you understand. So Young understood perfectly. The Vorthaks were expanding, taking colonies by force and calling it protection. It was slavery with better marketing. Of course, she said calmly. We wouldn't want to interfere with your protective services. I knew you would understand, Captain. Humans are so wonderfully reasonable. Unlike some species, you know when you are outmatched. The connection ended, and the bridge was silent, for a long moment. Finally, Hyunwoo spoke up. Captain, we can't just leave those people. We're not leaving them, So Young said quietly. Ji-eun, record everything we saw here. Full tactical analysis of their ship, their positions, their numbers. Send it all back to Earth through the secure channel. Yes, Captain. And send a personal message to Admiral Chen. Tell him that diplomatic solutions may not be sufficient. Hyunwoo looked confused. Captain, what does that mean? So Young looked out at the Vorthak destroyer, still sitting in orbit around the dead colony. It means we might need to remind the galaxy why humans stopped being soldiers in the first place. On Aurora Station, Dr. Yoo-Jin Park tried to focus on her research, but her hands were shaking as she prepared the tissue samples. 3 days ago, a Vorthak transport had docked with the station, requesting medical assistance for injured colonists. What she had seen in those transport holds would haunt her forever. The colonists weren't injured. They were being experimented on. Vorthak scientists were testing new biological weapons, using living beings as test subjects, and some of those beings were human. She had managed to take samples to document what she could, but when she tried to report it through official channels, her messages were blocked. The Vorthaks controlled the communication arrays in this sector now. But Yoo-Jin Park was the sister of a diplomat and the daughter of a soldier. She knew there were other ways to send messages. Late that night, she made her way to the station's communication center. The Vorthak guards were used to seeing her there. She often sent research reports to colleagues across the galaxy. They didn't pay attention as she started a routine data transmission to the University of Seoul. Hidden in the research data, invisible to casual inspection, was another message. A message to her brother, Tae-min, written in a code their father had taught them when they were children. The monsters are real, it said, and they have our people. The message traveled across the galaxy, bouncing from relay to relay, until it reached Earth. In his underground office, Director Nam-Soo Han read the decoded message and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had been preparing for this day for decades, hoping it would never come but ready for when it did. Hey, One, he called to his assistant. She appeared in his doorway, looking as calm and unremarkable as always. Yes, Director? Send a message to all deep cover operatives. Confirmation code. Alpha 77. Her eyes widened slightly. That was the code that meant prepare for possible activation. Are you sure, sir? Send it tonight. Across the galaxy, humans in a dozen different roles received the message. Teachers who had spent years studying alien cultures, doctors who knew the biology of every major species, traders who had mapped supply lines and resource stockpiles, engineers who had helped build defensive systems on alien worlds. All of them had been living normal lives, doing normal jobs, building normal relationships. All of them had been waiting for this message. On the Vorthak homeworld, Sungmin Oh sat in his small apartment and read the activation warning on his datapad. For 20 years, he had worked as a cultural attaché, helping to arrange exchanges between human and Vorthak institutions. His Vorthak friends saw him as a harmless academic, interested in their art and history. They had no idea that he spoke their language better than most natives, that he had memorized the location of every military facility on their world, and that the cultural research he conducted was actually detailed intelligence gathering. He opened a hidden compartment in his desk and looked at the equipment inside. Communication devices, analysis tools, and other items that would be very hard to explain if discovered. For 2 decades he had hoped he would never need to use them. Now it looked like he might. Back on Earth, Fleet Admiral Chang Ho-yoon stood in the command center of a facility that didn't officially exist. Around him, technicians monitored displays, showing the locations of ships and personnel across the galaxy. Most of those ships were listed in public records as civilian vessels, cargo haulers, research ships, colony transports. But Chang Ho knew what they really were. "Admiral," said his aide, "we're getting reports of Vorthak expansion in 7 sectors. They're taking colonies and calling it protective occupation. Casualties? Unknown, but probably significant. They're not being gentle about it." Chang Ho nodded. He had been expecting this. The Vorthaks had been getting more aggressive for years, pushing boundaries, testing reactions. They saw humanity's peaceful response as weakness. They were about to learn the difference between weakness and patience. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," he said. "Prepare for Operation Clean Slate. Authorization level is still yellow, but they should be ready to move to red on short notice." "Yes, sir." Chang Ho looked at the star map on the wall, showing the peaceful galaxy that humanity had helped to maintain for 50 years. It was a good galaxy mostly, fair and prosperous, and safe. But some people only understood one kind of strength, and if that was what it took to protect the innocent, then that was what they would get. The galaxy thought humans were peaceful because they were weak. Soon, they would learn that humans were peaceful because they chose to be. And when that choice was taken away from them, the galaxy would remember why humanity had once been the most feared species on their own world. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime buzzed with the voices of 100 different species. Ambassador Taemin Park stood at the center podium, his dark suit simple compared to the colorful robes and armor of the alien delegates around him. He smiled as he looked out at the crowd, knowing that most of them saw him as weak and harmless. 50 years ago, humanity joined this great council, Taemin said into the translator that would carry his words to every corner of the galaxy. 50 years of peace. 50 years of solving problems with words instead of weapons. The Vorthak delegates, tall reptilian creatures with sharp teeth, made clicking sounds that their translators turned into polite applause. But Taemin could see the amusement in their yellow eyes. To them, humans were useful pets who could be sent to stop fights without getting their own claws dirty. War Chief Graktor leaned back in his chair, his massive frame making the metal creak. "The humans have indeed been helpful," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "So gentle, so peaceful. They never hurt anyone, even when they should." Laughter rippled through the Vorthak section. The Quillen traders, spider-like beings, who controlled most of the galaxy's commerce, tapped their many legs in agreement. Even the ancient ethereal collective, floating wisps of energy who claimed to be above such things, pulsed with what looked like amusement. Taemin kept smiling. He had heard these same jokes for decades. Humans were the galaxy's mediators because they were too weak to be warriors. They were trusted with peacekeeping because they could never be a real threat to anyone. Let them think that, he told himself. Let them all think that. "We are proud to serve," he said simply. "Peace is humanity's greatest strength." More clicking laughter from the Vorthaks, more leg tapping from the Quillens. Taemin bowed politely and stepped down from the podium. As he walked through the crowd, alien delegates patted him on the shoulder, or offered what they thought were compliments about human gentleness. 3 sectors away, Captain So-Young Kim stood on the bridge of the peacekeeping vessel Harmony's Edge. The ship looked like what it was supposed to be, a diplomatic transport with light weapons and heavy communication arrays. Her crew of 40, humans wore simple blue uniforms without any military decorations. "Captain," said Communications Officer Ji-Un Choi, "we're getting reports of fighting in the Kepler system. The locals want peacekeepers." So, Young nodded. "How bad is it?" 2 colony ships arguing over mining rights. No weapons fired yet, but both sides are angry. Tactical Officer Yunwoo Lee looked up from his station. Standard deployment, Captain? Standard, So Young agreed. We go in, we listen to both sides, we find a solution that works for everyone. No force, no threats, just talk. The bridge crew nodded. They had done this hundreds of times. Humanity's reputation was built on missions like this, going into dangerous situations and somehow making everyone happy without firing a single shot. The galaxy saw it as proof that humans were naturally peaceful. What the galaxy didn't see were the detailed reports that went back to Earth after every mission. Reports about ship designs, weapon capabilities, tactical doctrines, and resource locations. Information that was carefully filed away in archives that officially didn't exist. On Earth, Director Namsu Han sat in an office deep underground. The walls around him were covered with screens showing data from across the galaxy. Trade routes, military bases, population centers, strategic resources, all of it mapped and cataloged by 50 years of peacekeeping missions. His assistant, a young woman named Haiwan Jung, brought him a cup of coffee and a data pad. To anyone watching, she looked like a simple clerk. Her job was supposed to be managing supply requests for human colonies, but the requests she processed were very different from what they appeared to be. The mining equipment for New Busan is ready for shipment, she said quietly. Namsu looked at the datapad. New Busan was a human colony near Vorthak space. The mining equipment was actually components for a defensive array that could stop a fleet. But on paper, it was just industrial machinery. Good, he said. What about the medical supplies for Aurora Station? Dr. Eugene Park confirmed receipt. Everything is in place. Namsu nodded. Dr. Park was Tae-min's sister, a xenobiologist studying alien life forms. Her research station was officially neutral, welcoming scientists from all species. In reality, it was perfectly positioned to monitor everything happening in 3 different sectors. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Teachers discussed educational materials that were actually intelligence reports. Doctors talked about medical research that mapped alien biology and potential weaknesses. Traders arranged commercial deals that were really strategic resource positioning. The galaxy saw a species that loved peace above all else. What they didn't see was a species that had learned the hardest lesson in the universe. If you want peace, you must be ready for war. Back on Nexus Prime, Tae-min Park met with his aide in a private room. The aide was a quiet man named Sung-min, who had worked with human diplomats for 20 years. Most aliens barely noticed him. How did the speech go? Sung-min asked. The same as always, Tae-min replied. They think we're harmless. Are you comfortable with that? Tae-min was quiet for a moment. My grandfather fought in the Korean War. My father served during the resource conflicts. They both told me the same thing. The best fight is the one you never have to have. And if we do have to fight? Tae-min looked out the window at the alien ships docked around the station. Vorthak destroyers, Quillan trade vessels, ethereal science ships, all of them trusting that the humans around them were too peaceful to be dangerous. Then we fight to win, he said quietly. Completely and finally, Sung-min nodded. He had spent decades building relationships with aliens across the galaxy. They saw him as a helpful human who could arrange meetings and handle paperwork. They had no idea that every conversation, every document, every casual comment was being recorded and analyzed. As the day ended on Nexus Prime, the alien delegates went to their quarters talking about the gentle humans and their amusing weakness. They made plans for trade routes and territorial expansions, secure in the knowledge that the galaxy's peacekeepers would never be strong enough to stop them if they really wanted something. In the human quarters, Tae-min Park sat at his desk and wrote a simple report. All quiet. Relationship stable. Recommend continued peaceful approach. The report would go to Earth through normal diplomatic channels. But hidden in the text, invisible to alien monitors, was another message entirely. A message that would be decoded by people like Namsu Han and filed away with thousands of others, all waiting for the day they might be needed. Because humanity had learned something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Peace was not the absence of the ability to make war. Peace was the choice not to use that ability. For now, humanity chose peace. But they were ready for the day when that choice might be taken away from them. And on that day, the galaxy would learn what humans really were.